There is a settlement buried under 14 meters of sediment in South Asia that was occupied continuously for 9,000 years, longer than ancient Egypt existed as a civilization. Archaeologists found it by accident in 2001 while testing ocean water near the coast of Gujarat, India. The sonar image showed rectangular structures, cobblestone streets, and what appeared to be a drainage system. It was sitting on the floor of the Gulf of Khambhat. That is not a legend. That is not a fringe theory. The National Institute of Ocean Technology, a government body reporting to India's Ministry of Earth Sciences, published the survey data. And scientists have been arguing about what it means ever since. Because if the dates hold, it does not fit inside any timeline historians currently accept. That is one site. There are 4 others. Every civilization on this list was found by accident, misidentified at first, or actively resisted by the academic mainstream for years before the evidence became too large to dismiss. What connects them is not mystery for its own sake. It is the specific, documented moment when a researcher looked at a date, a depth, or a structure and realized the timeline they had been working with was wrong. Some of these sites rewrote regional history. One may rewrite all of it. We start with the least controversial entry on the list, and even that one took decades to accept. One thing before we begin, where in the world are you watching this? Leave your country below. You'd be surprised how many corners of the earth tune in for stories like this. Çatalhöyük, Central Anatolia, Turkey. Elevation, 960 meters above sea level on the Konya Plain. In 1958, British archaeologist James Mellart was traveling through the region when he noticed an unusually large mound rising from the flat plain, roughly 500 meters long and 300 meters wide. He began excavating in 1961. What he found beneath the surface was a city of up to 10,000 people that had been continuously inhabited from approximately 7,500 BCE to 5,700 BCE. Nearly 2,000 years of unbroken urban life, at a time when, according to the models then in use, humans were not yet supposed to be living in cities at all. The site was published in the journal Anatolian Studies beginning in 1962, and Mellart's findings were later expanded by Ian Hodder of Stanford University, who relaunched excavations in 1993 under the Çatalhöyük Research Project, continuing through 2017. The settlement had no streets. Houses were built directly against each other with no gaps between walls. Residents entered their homes through holes in the roof, climbing down wooden ladders. The dead were buried beneath the floors of the living spaces, sometimes directly under sleeping platforms. There is no evidence of a centralized authority, no palace, no administrative building, no structure that clearly outranks the others. 10,000 people, organized into a functional settlement with no detectable hierarchy, that has no good parallel anywhere in the ancient world. Hodder's team, reporting in the Journal of World Prehistory in 2014, noted that despite 18 seasons of excavation, researchers still cannot determine how collective decisions were made. There is no obvious meeting place. No structure serves an administrative function. How 10,000 people coordinated food storage, construction, and burial practice without any detectable leadership structure? That question does not have an answer yet. Caral, Soup Valley, north-central Peru. Approximately 180 kilometers north of Lima, in a desert coastal valley bordered by the Andes to the east. In 1996, Peruvian archaeologist Ruth Shady Solis of the Universidad Nacional Mayor de San Marcos began systematic excavations at a site local communities had known about for decades, but which had been largely ignored by academic institutions. Carbon dating of woven reed bags, called shikras, found inside the construction fill of the platform mounds returned dates of 2,600 to 2000 BCE. Those dates place Caral as a contemporary of the Old Kingdom of Egypt, in the early dynastic period of Mesopotamia. It was the oldest known city in the Western Hemisphere by more than 1,000 years. Shady Solis published the findings in Science magazine in 2001, co-authored with Jonathan Haas and Winifred Creamer of the Field Museum in Chicago. Caral covers an area of approximately 66 hectares and contains 6 large platform mounds, the largest of which rises 18 meters above the valley floor and measures 150 meters by 160 meters at its base, comparable in volume to several of the smaller Egyptian pyramids. The city supported a population estimated between 3,000 and 5,000 permanent residents, with a surrounding network of smaller sites housing additional populations. It was a fully functioning urban center with monumental public architecture, residential districts, and what appear to be ceremonial spaces, all of this in a desert valley with virtually no rainfall, sustained entirely by irrigation from the Soup River. Here is the detail that still generates argument. Caral shows no evidence whatsoever of warfare. No defensive walls, no weapons found in any excavation layer, no skeletal trauma consistent with organized violence in any of the burials Shady Solis's team examined. For a 5,000-year-old city, that is genuinely anomalous. Almost every early urban center that archaeologists have studied shows evidence of conflict at some point in its occupation. Caral, across centuries of continuous habitation, does not. Instead of weapons, excavators found 32 flutes carved from condor and pelican bones, and 37 cornets made from deer and llama bones, all recovered from a single deposit in 2002, and reported by Shady Solis in publications of the Proyecto Especial Arqueológico Caral Supe. Music. In a city that left no record of war, Caral had no writing system, none that has been identified, but excavators found quipus, knotted string devices that later Inca civilization used for record-keeping. The Caral quipus predate Inca use of the same technology by more than 4,000 years. What information those knots encode, whether they are numerical records, calendrical data, or something else entirely, has not been decoded. No one has yet determined what Caral's residents were recording, or why, or whether the quipu tradition was continuous from Caral to the Inca, or invented independently twice. Göbekli Tepe, southeastern Turkey, approximately 15 kilometers northeast of the city of Şanlıurfa, on a limestone ridge at an elevation of 760 meters. In 1994, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt of the German Archaeological Institute arrived at a site that had been briefly noted by University of Chicago researchers in 1963 and dismissed as a medieval cemetery. Schmidt looked at the same mound and saw something different. He began excavating, and within the first season, exposed T-shaped limestone pillars standing up to 5 meters tall and weighing between 10 and 20 metric tons, arranged in circles, carved with high-relief images of foxes, scorpions, vultures, and lions. Radiocarbon dating of organic material from the fill returned dates of approximately 9,600 BCE. That is 11,600 years before the present. It is the oldest known example of monumental architecture on Earth, older than Stonehenge by 6,000 years, older than the Egyptian pyramids by 7,000 years. Schmidt published his initial findings in the journal Natur und Geist and subsequently in Deutsches Archäologieblatt, with major findings compiled in his 2006 book Sie bauten die ersten Tempel, later translated and discussed extensively in Klaus Dieter Leidner's reviews in Cambridge Archaeological Journal. The date alone is not the problem. The problem is what the date implies about who built it. 9,600 BCE places Göbekli Tepe firmly in the pre-pottery Neolithic A period, a time when the prevailing model of human development held that people in this region were nomadic hunter-gatherers with no fixed settlements, no surplus food production, and no social organization capable of coordinating large construction projects. To quarry, transport, shape, and erect pillars weighing up to 20 metric tons, you need a workforce. To feed and organize that workforce over months or years, you need agriculture, or something functionally equivalent to it. But the archaeological record at Göbekli Tepe shows no evidence of farming, no domesticated plant species in the botanical remains, no domesticated animal bones in the faunal assemblage, at least not in the earliest layers. The people who built this had not yet invented agriculture. They hunted gazelle and gathered wild grains, and somehow still managed to construct the most complex stone monument of their era. Schmidt spent the rest of his career, he died in 2014, arguing that Göbekli Tepe inverted the standard model entirely. His position, stated directly in interviews and publications, was that the need to feed the workforce that built the temple complex may have been what drove the development of agriculture in the surrounding region, not the other way around. The monument came first, the farming followed. That is a reversal of one of the foundational assumptions in the archaeology of human civilization, and it remains contested. Stanford University archaeologist Ian Hodder, writing in Current Anthropology in 2014, described Göbekli Tepe as requiring a fundamental rethinking of the relationship between ritual, monument building, and the emergence of settled life. The site covers approximately 90,000 square meters. Geomagnetic survey conducted by the German Archaeological Institute in 2012 estimated that only about 5% of the site has been excavated. What the remaining 95% contains is not yet known. The circles at Göbekli Tepe were deliberately buried. Someone filled them in with rubble, flint tools, and animal bones, intentionally, carefully, and completely, and then built new circles on top. This happened multiple times across the site's history. Schmidt noted this pattern but could not explain it before his death. No subsequent researcher has produced an accepted explanation for why a community would bury its own monuments with such evident care. It is not erosion. It is not abandonment. It is deliberate, and no one knows why. Something even more extreme is waiting in the next two entries, and one of them has been sitting underwater for so long that the sediment above it is older than the first Egyptian dynasty. Yonaguni Monument. Located approximately 100 meters off the southern coast of Yonaguni Island, the westernmost island of Japan's Ryukyu archipelago in the East China Sea, the structure sits at a depth of between 5 and 27 meters below the ocean surface. In 1986, local dive tour operator Kihachiro Aratake was exploring the underwater terrain near Yonaguni when he encountered a series of massive, flat-topped stone terraces, right-angle corners, and what appeared to be a broad staircase cut into solid bedrock. The structure spans approximately 250 meters east to west and 50 meters north to south, with the tallest section rising 27 meters from the seafloor. Aratake reported the find to Masaaki Kimura, professor of marine geology at the University of the Ryukyus, who conducted the first systematic scientific investigation beginning in 1992. Kimura published his analysis in multiple papers, including a study appearing in the Journal of the Geological Society of Japan in 2004, arguing that at least portions of the structure showed evidence of human modification. The disagreement about Yonaguni is not fringe versus mainstream. It is a documented, ongoing dispute between two credentialed scientific positions, and the evidence supporting both sides is real. Kimura's position: the structure contains features that do not occur naturally in Yonaguni's sandstone geology. These include what he identified as a triangular depression he called the star shape, a trench he described as the moat, running along the southern face of the main terrace, twin standing stones on the upper platform, and what appear to be carved symbols on certain rock faces. Kimura argued that while the base geology is natural, the shaping of these features required human intervention. He estimated the structure was last above sea level approximately 10,000 years ago, based on known post-glacial sea level rise data, placing any potential human activity there before the end of the last ice age. Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University who holds a doctorate from Yale University, conducted his own dive surveys at Yonaguni and reached the opposite conclusion. Schoch published his assessment in the journal Discover in 1999 and expanded his analysis in his 2002 book, Voices of the Rocks. His position, the right-angle faces, flat platforms, and terraced appearance of the Yonaguni structure are entirely consistent with natural sandstone erosion. Yonaguni's mudstone and sandstone layers fracture along parallel joints and bedding planes, producing naturally flat surfaces and sharp corners without any human involvement. Schoch found no tool marks, no carvings he considered definitively artificial, and no associated artifacts on the seafloor that would indicate human habitation. Here is where it gets genuinely complicated. Both men are looking at the same structure. Both are credentialed geologists. Both have dived the site personally, and they have reached opposite conclusions about the most basic question: was this made by people or not? After examining the same physical evidence, that disagreement has not been resolved. No third systematic geological survey of the full structure has been published in a peer-reviewed journal since Kimura's 2004 paper. What is not disputed: the structure is real, it is large, it is geometrically striking, and the rock in which it sits was above sea level somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 years ago, based on post-glacial sea level data published by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in its 2007 Fourth Assessment Report. No sediment cores have been taken from the seafloor immediately adjacent to the main terrace to establish a reliable stratigraphic date for when the structure was last exposed. Without that data, the 10,000-year estimate for when it was above water remains an approximation derived from regional sea level curves rather than site-specific evidence. Kimura requested funding for exactly this kind of survey on multiple occasions. As of the last published record of his work in 2014, that survey had not been conducted. The structure has not been formally assessed under Japan's law for the protection of cultural properties, meaning it has no legal status as either a natural formation or an archaeological site. It exists legally and scientifically in a category that has no name yet. Gulf of Khambhat, also known as the Gulf of Khambhat, northwestern India, off the coast of the state of Gujarat, approximately 40 kilometers west of the city of Surat. The structures lie on the seafloor at a depth of between 30 and 40 meters. In December 2001, the National Institute of Ocean Technology, a research body operating under India's Ministry of Earth Sciences, headquartered in Chennai, was conducting routine pollution surveys in the Gulf of Khambhat using side-scan sonar equipment. The sonar returns showed anomalous geometric features on the seafloor. When the team examined the data more closely, they found what appeared to be two distinct urban-scale areas of regular geometric structure, each approximately 9 kilometers long, arranged on either side of a now submerged ancient river channel. The government of India announced the discovery in January 2002. S.R. Rao, former head of the Marine Archaeology Unit of the Archaeological Survey of India, was among the first credentialed archaeologists to assess the sonar data publicly. Then the dates came back. A wood sample dredged from the site, recovered through suction dredging of the seafloor rather than controlled excavation, was submitted for accelerator mass spectrometry radiocarbon dating. The result, reported by the National Institute of Ocean Technology in their 2002 technical report to the Ministry of Earth Sciences, placed the wood sample at approximately 7,500 BCE to 6,500 BCE. If that date applies to the structures and not to naturally deposited driftwood, And that distinction is the entire argument. Then the Gulf of Khambhat site predates the Indus Valley civilization by more than 4,000 years, predates Mesopotamia's earliest cities by 3,000 years, and pushes the origin of urban settlement in South Asia back further than any currently accepted model allows. The response from the international archaeological community was not enthusiasm. It was skepticism, and much of that skepticism is methodologically sound. Shireen Ratnagar, archaeologist and author of Understanding Harappa, published by Tulika Books in 2001, raised the core objection in print. Suction dredging is not a controlled excavation technique. Material recovered this way cannot be reliably associated with specific structures or stratigraphic layers. The wood could be ancient. It could also be naturally deposited organic material that has nothing to do with human construction at the site. Without proper archaeological excavation, which requires underwater dig teams, careful stratigraphic recording, and systematic artifact recovery, the date of the wood tells you the date of the wood, not the date of the city. This is a real methodological problem, and it has not been resolved because a proper controlled excavation of the Gulf of Khambhat site has never been conducted. What has been done? The National Institute of Ocean Technology published side-scan sonar mosaics showing the geometric patterning of the seafloor features. Additional dredging recovered what the agency described as worked stone, ceramic-like fragments, and human tooth fossils. The tooth material was also submitted for dating and returned results consistent with the wood sample, according to the Institute's technical reports. Glenn Milne, a geophysicist then at the University of Durham, published sea level modeling data in the journal Nature in 2002, showing that the Gulf of Khambhat region would have been dry land during the period between 9,000 and 6,000 BCE, consistent with the dates the Indian Agency reported, and consistent with what is known about post-glacial sea level rise in the Indian Ocean region following the end of the last ice age. So the geography works. The dates from the organic material work. The sonar imagery is real, and it is striking. What does not yet exist is the controlled excavation that would allow anyone to say with scientific confidence whether those geometric features on the seafloor are the remains of a human settlement or an unusual natural formation in the local geology. The Archaeological Survey of India, the body with primary jurisdiction over the site, has not conducted a systematic underwater excavation of the Gulf of Khambhat structures as of the most recent publicly available official record. The reasons cited in government communications have included the depth of the site, the strong tidal currents in the Gulf, among the highest tidal ranges in the world, reaching up to 11 meters according to Indian National Center for Ocean Information Services data, and the low visibility conditions that make controlled underwater work extremely difficult. The human tooth fossils recovered by dredging from the Gulf of Khambhat site have never been subjected to ancient DNA analysis. In 2023, a team led by David Reich of Harvard Medical School published a landmark ancient DNA study of South Asian populations in Science, reconstructing population movements across the subcontinent over the past 10,000 years. The Gulf of Khambhat tooth material is not referenced in that study. If the teeth were properly excavated, documented, and submitted for aDNA analysis, the result would either place their owners within the known genetic landscape of ancient South Asia, or it would not. That is a testable question. The material to test it was recovered more than 20 years ago. It has not been tested in any published study. No explanation for why it has not been tested has been provided in any document currently in the public record. That is where the Gulf of Khambhat stands today. Not proven, not disproven. Sitting under 40 meters of water and 11 meters of tidal fluctuation, in one of the most difficult marine environments in the world to excavate, with a tooth sample in a laboratory somewhere that could, in principle, answer a question about the earliest cities in human history, and no published record of anyone having asked it of that sample yet. If you have ever read about a site that you think belongs on this list, or if you know something about the Gulf of Khambhat that contradicts anything said here, put it in the comments.